The extraordinary rendition of Janos Farkas. Chapter 14. Their faces were like two Goya portraits in very small frames, trying to communicate with each other from opposite sides of a dark, sinister gallery. Their words were soft and usually did not make it over the moans and groans and screams and other sounds of the terrorized on the lower levels of far Philistin. And so they read lips and talked with their hands as best they could through the small barred openings of their cell doors. Janos learned that Mustafa had already been there a year. The torture for him was over. No, he had not told them anything. What was there to tell? And with that, he pointed up at the surveillance cameras in the corridor. When Janos asked him how he got there, Mustafa put his hand over his eyes and then his mouth and lifted the other hand to indicate flight. Who? Janos mouthed. He did not need to be much of a lip reader to get the answer, which came as loud as words: Americans. The orange jumpsuit, the enema, the drugs, the hood, the flight, the humiliation, it was all too fresh in Janos' mind to need to ask more. He mouthed the word escape and watched as Mustafa shook his head and pulled on the bars to show the futility of it. Janos moved his hands to indicate someone counting out a pile of money. Bribe? Mustafa didn't answer because there was a heavy-footed sound of guards approaching. Any faces at the little windows were gone, none wanting the guards to stop at their grave. The key clicked in Janos' door. There were two guards. One was the guard from breakfast, the other new. They put a thick web belt around his waist, handcuffing him to the manacles, and then a black hood over his head. This was going to be no sightseeing tour. Janos felt himself being led out of his area and along a corridor. When they stopped, he heard an elevator moving and the door opening. The ride was short, only 2 floors, then along another corridor and into a room. The hands of the guards released him and he heard footsteps leaving and the door closing. He stood there in the blackness of the hood, listening to his own breathing, listening to the beat of his own heart. "Hello," he said. There was no hello back. 2 or 3 minutes passed, minutes of eternity, with nothing being said. The dense blackness, the absolute solitude started to eat at his mind, and the thought of being buried alive started to grow like a demon. He shook his masked head, squeezed his manacle hands, bit his lips and growled at that demon. Bending his head as far down as he could and raising his manacled hands as far up as they would go, he felt for the black cloth of the hood. Nothing. Straining his neck and forcing his hands until his biceps ached, he finally felt an edge of cloth between his index fingers. Pinching them together, he pulled it down. They slid off the cloth. Straining to reach it again, he was sure the cloth had moved a little. He tried again and again. Finally, the cloth had moved enough that he could pinch it securely between his thumb and index finger, and he pulled. The bag came off as if it had never been secured at all. He raised his head into the blackness, only to be blinded by 2 intense lights. Not being able to shield his eyes, with his hands he turned. The long black shadows of his being were cast against the wall. In the middle of his shadows, growing high, was a heavy wooden chair. It was bolted to the floor. On its marred arms and legs there were manacles for human arms and legs. He stared at the brightness of the wall between the 2 shadows, forcing his pupils to shrink. Turning, he still had to squeeze his eyelids, squinting into the glare. When his pupils had almost shrunk into nothingness, what he saw was not encouraging. He was staring into 2 floodlights pointed directly at him. Behind the lights he could vaguely make out the shapes of men. Between the lights was a mirror reflecting his own brightly lit image. He looked away from the lights. There was a guard at the door. It was not one of those that had brought him. No one moved, no one talked, no one told him what to do. Janos didn't need an explanation to know that the chair in the middle of the room was for him, and he went and sat in it, waiting to be questioned. waiting to be interrogated, waiting to be physically abused. "Who are you?" he asked, looking at the dark shapes. The only answer he got was the smile of his own face in the mirror. The silence continued, only the hum of the lights could be heard. "What do you want?" he asked. "Why am I here?" No answer. "Maybe I'm talking to the wrong person," he said, shifting his look directly into the mirror. You behind the mirror, you who is watching me. What is it you want me to say? What is it you want me to admit to?" He stood up and stepped closer to the mirror. "Who are you that you would hide behind a one-way mirror? What are you frightened of? Me? Who are you? Americans? Germans? British? Jews? No, I don't think you're Jews. The Jews wouldn't bring me here. Not to this place. Whoever you are, you have nothing to fear. I am nothing more than a poor innocent actor." He mimed a face of innocence to the mirror. "What language would you like to be questioned in?" a voice from behind the lights asked. "What language would the people behind the mirror like?" he replied. "English, German, Bosnian?" "Whichever you like." "Then I will answer in all of them. I have nothing to hide in any language." "As you wish," the voice said. "Would you like me to sit down?" "However the most comfortable," the voice answered. "You may not want to stand. This could take a while." As Janos went back to the chair, he could hear movement behind him. Turning, he saw a man emerging from behind each light, each dragging a chair toward him. They sat in front on either side of him, the floodlights over their inside shoulders, the ever-present mirror between them. To look from one to the other, Janos's eyes were subjected to the glare of the lights, making it disorienting and confusing. "What is your name?" the man on the left asked. Janos Farkas, but of course you know that." "Where are you from?" the other man asked. "Bosnia, but of course you know that too." "Where in Bosnia?" "Dubaj." Janos waited for the questions to become difficult, to take a direction, but they never did, remaining commonplace questions that could lead to no conclusions. Back and forth from one man to the other, a ping-pong of innocuous, guileless questions. "What was your mother's name? Your father's? Who did you like best? Do you have any brothers or sisters? What's your sister's name? That's a nice name. Did you get along? Did you have any pets when you grew up? A cat? A dog? What are your favorite memories of growing up?" The questions that could have been asked, should have been asked, never came. They remained ordinary and mundane, questions and answers that could be of no possible interest to anyone but him. The answers only proved that his childhood was as ordinary a life as anyone could lead. But the ease of the questions also put him at ease, and he talked about his childhood, pranks he had played, favorite games, his soccer heroes, and stories of family life. As an actor, he was a natural-born storyteller, and the answers flowed. "I remember once," he said, "when Gazella dared me to steal a pie from Widow Goindy's window. She was a rich bitch and hated kids. There were purple pie stains all over our faces when we got home, and we didn't get any desserts or sweets for 2 weeks. The thing about it was that the pie wasn't that good. The rich bitch couldn't cook." This went on for another hour. Finally, the man on the left said, "That's all for today. See, that wasn't too bad. People think we do nothing but beat and torture our guests. But you can see we're nothing like that. All we want is to find out the truth. You're free to go now." "Free to go?" "Yes, back to your cell," the other man said. There was a smile on his face, but it was not a smile you wanted to smile along with. That's the end of chapter 14. Tomorrow, chapter 15.